Hello, we are at the COP29 venue. This is the media center and it's around 3:30 p.m. So earlier this morning, two draft decisions on Article 6, Article 6.2 and Article 6.4 were released, and these draft decisions are most likely to be adopted at the plenary, which is scheduled for 7 p.m. Article 6 enables voluntary cooperation between countries to implement their nationally determined contributions or NDCs. So Article 6 has been mentioned quite widely during the negotiations. So the COP presidency considered Article 6 as a key negotiating priority. Through the negotiations, we found the European Union, for instance, during a press conference, they spoke about using Article 6 to bring in additional financing for the new climate finance goal, which is the NCQG, which is also being negotiated. Then we also had Bangladesh, the negotiators from Bangladesh talk about Article 6. While they consider it to be important, they do not see a value in using that. Primarily, they said that developed nations should not outsource their mitigation to developing countries, and they need to take the lead on doing domestic mitigation, and also highlighted that Article 6 has transparency issues. So now moving on to Article 6.4, which actually establishes a global carbon market where countries, companies, individuals can trade carbon credits. So carbon credit is actually 1 ton of CO2 equivalent that is either removed from the atmosphere or reduced through projects that bring about emission reductions or remove CO2 from the atmosphere. So sometime in October, so you have the supervisory body, which is a UN team responsible for overseeing the market. They adopted certain rules that govern the Article 6.4 mechanism, and they had asked the CMA, which is the governing body, to endorse those rules. And on day one of the COP negotiations, the COP presidency announced that the nations had reached a consensus on these rules, and they asked the CMA to provide further guidance on how the supervisory body can improve those rules. So Trishant, my colleague, had already explained the negotiations, the developments that happened in week 1. Now we are going to be talking about week 2. So it started with a draft text emerging where there was a line included that there would be no substantive, or rather the supervisory body would avoid making frequent revisions, substantive revisions to the standards that were adopted. And then this was opposed by many developing countries who said that changes should be allowed if there is new science supporting it. So now over the course of negotiation, we've seen that they've reached sort of middle ground where it says that supervisory body, where they've requested the supervisory body to avoid making more revisions, while still ensuring that the best available science is reflected in the standards. So the draft decision is likely to be adopted later this evening, which was the draft decision that was released earlier today. So that's 6.4. 6.2 involves bilateral, multilateral agreements between countries. It's a more decentralized system. So 6.2 was fairly contentious through the negotiations. So for most part of the negotiations, there was a huge debate over the international registry, which will actually track all the transactions. So while some countries like the US wanted to not have an international registry that tracks those transactions, there were developing countries who actually voiced their concerns because they might not have a capacity to set up national sort of registries. So they requested an international registry where all of this could be tracked. So now they've again reached a middle ground, and the Secretariat has been asked to provide this kind of services to developing nations. There is weak language used in the text, which could lead to misuse by some countries. Like for instance, if certain inconsistencies have been found in the submissions by a particular country, for instance, and it's been flagged, they can still use it. There's nothing to stop them from using it as part of their NDCs. The text right now says that they're requested not to use it as part of their NDCs if they're found to be, until they address those inconsistencies. So that's a weak language there. And also another concern was human rights violations. So if a project is causing, is leading to human rights violations, they can still use those credits to their NDCs. There's nothing to stop them. They're just requested not to do it, but there's nothing to stop them. So there have been issues, and we'll have to see how things go forward. Stay tuned for more updates from COP29.